I'd like to welcome each and every one of you here, especially those that have traveled from California, Louisiana, Florida, New York, Ohio, and beautiful Ontario. It seems as though the older I get, the quicker the wheel turns from homecoming to homecoming. Now this one has just flown by. So I know that God has blessed you in the last year, and if you came this afternoon expecting a blessing, you will surely receive one.
Lord, I have nothing but this old life to give. Now I coming home. Coming home, I'm coming home. I'm sorry I stayed away so long, so long. You're so good, boy. You're so love, love, Lord, I love you. Oh.
In the old graveyards of Raleigh Township in southwestern Ontario lie many of the black pioneers of the Elgin settlement. This historic Canadian settlement was founded in 1849 by Reverend William King, an Irish Presbyterian minister who had experienced slavery in the American South. King's dream of a black settlement on lands north of Lake Erie near Chatham met with great protest, but he appealed to public opinion and in November 1849 arrived in Canada from Louisiana with 15 ex-slaves to build the Elgin settlement. This is the land they cleared, subduing a wilderness, staking out farms, building homes, and planting their first crops. Dorothy Shadd Shreve's family settled just outside Buxton in 1852. They were always involved with life in the settlement. A founding member of the Raleigh Township Centennial Museum, she volunteers her time to keep Buxton's history alive.
Reverend King's main reason for forming the settlement was to give the 15 slaves that he had inherited an opportunity to be free people and to make their own way in the world as free people. He thought that Canada was the only place where they could do that. This quilt was dedicated to the original Buxton settlers. Now the 15 slaves that Reverend King brought here were Eliza, Amelia, Isay, Emmeline, Talbot King, Benjamin Ferris, Jacob King, Fanny Ferris, Robert Ferris, Stephen Ferris, Peter King, Solomon, Harriet, Sarah, and Molly. The main livelihood of the slaves was to be farming. Definitely that was the purpose of buying the land, so that they could farm it, grow their own food, and grow other foods to sell, like wheat and corn and oats and barley and so forth. They also could cut wood and sell the wood. They could burn wood and sell the potash. But their chief livelihood was to be from the farm itself.
Donald Johnston and his wife Lola live on the farm his grandparents established in 1855. Abraham Johnston escaped to Buxton in 1852 after the Christiana riots in Pennsylvania. Safe in Buxton, Abraham married Clarissa Bristow, who had come from Louisiana via Detroit.
As far back as I can remember, there's always been a Johnson farm. They arrived here, well, I don't know exactly just what time they'd taken the land up, but it was way back there in, I suppose, in 55 at least. And they used to, they had a farm taken up back on number 2 highway. And it was so wet back there, then they come back here and settled. And they built a house down the road here, a log house. And that's where they started raising their family. And of course, those days they had big families. There was 12 children in the family. I was raised right here. Went to school at South Buxton here. Very few colored kids was in this area at the time when I went to school. And I still have the friends, and they're just as good as they were at the time.
In 1854, Buxton was a thriving, all-black settlement, self-supporting. They had established a sawmill, a potash factory, and a brickyard, and products were being sold in Buffalo and Detroit. The Buxton Mission School was the best school around, and it was, by this time, an integrated school. The people of the settlement were interesting themselves in all things for their own betterment and for the abolition of slavery.
Buxton's reputation as a haven for slaves was well known. This gift, the Liberty Bell, sent by the black residents of Pittsburgh, rang out in welcome each time an escaped slave made it to freedom in the settlement. The bell still hangs in the steeple of St. Andrew's Church in South Buxton and still rings out its message of freedom over the fields of Raleigh Township. The meaning of this gift continues to echo for Edna Jordan Smith, a resident of Louisiana who, with her daughters, comes to celebrate her relationship with the people of Buxton.
Well, I learned about the community in Buxton from reading a book. I'm a librarian, and I ordered a book, Exploring Black America by Marvella Thumb. Upon receiving that book, I thumbed through it and ran across this article about a Louisiana plantation owner taking his slaves from Louisiana and bringing them to Canada. After reading that information, Ollie sent some brochures from the museum here, and it indicated that those slaves were from the Felicianas. And of course, that just blew me away because my people were in bondage in that same area. And naturally, I wanted to know more about it.
I made it back, and you didn't expect me.
What are you doing now?
Just fine. Oh, my goodness. It's so good seeing you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
telling
yes.
you, I had been...
I came, I think it was in 82. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry, it was in 81. And I found a very articulate people. I found people who were so into their blackness, even though they were now Canadians. But they knew of their Louisiana connection, but had never dreamed of just trying to rediscover the state. Here's Fanny Ferris. You notice the spelling has been changed. She took the plantation owner's name. Fanny was from Jackson, Louisiana, one of the original 15 who came in with Reverend King.
In 1858, the American abolitionist John Brown held a convention in Chatham's First Baptist Church. Brown planned to raid an arsenal at Harper's Ferry, march south, and smash slavery. The raid failed. 2 years later, the American Civil War began. Scores of Buxton's men and women enlisted in the Union Army. When the Civil War ended, many Buxton families returned to the United States.
Many people returned to the USA after the Civil War in search of the relatives that they had left in slavery when they came to Canada. Each man had to travel for himself, really, to come to Canada, and they couldn't bring all of their relatives. They were not able to keep track of where their relatives were. Some were sold in slavery down the river and so forth. And they were people who were family-oriented. The black people were family-oriented. and they went back to be reunited with their family or to discover just where their families were and to take up life again where they had broken off their relationship with their relatives.
The return to the South severely depleted the settlement. Without the vibrant community life they once had, some of the people who stayed on encountered difficult times.
Some sold their farms to other people that come in the area, and that's the way it all went. All these farms along here was owned by the black people, but they lost it to through hard times, and couldn't make the money for to pay off the debts, and these people lost it to them.
And they couldn't borrow money then from
it.
banks, you know. They had to go to individual to borrow money, and the interest rate was high, and if you just got back a little bit on your payments, Mother Johnson said they just come in and take your land.
What they call chattel mortgages.
Chattel mortgage. Mm-hmm.
And that meant if you couldn't pay it at the end of the year, they could come and seize your stuff.
The building of the railroads in the early 1870s provided jobs for many of the settlers who had lost their farms and those who had decided to stop farming. North Buxton then became the center of life for the Elgin settlement.
Good morning. Nice warm day today, huh? Any mail, Shirley? Not yet. Not in yet. Okay. In the 1800s, there were 700 young people from here educated in the schools here, Buxton and Chatham, and of course Toronto, that went back and contributed to the reconstruction in the South. A liter of milk, a liter of the 2%. Has Madeline called over this morning?
Yes, she did. I don't know, but that's what Shelley was doing here.
Oh, Shelley picked it up
Shelley
for her.
picked it up for her.
Oh, well, that's good.
Okay, anything else?
Isn't marked.
I know what it is.
I think that's all.
If we could mark that, we could take it down to Brad.
More than a century later, the people of Buxton prepare for their 62nd Labor Day weekend homecoming. Brian Prince is vice president of the North Buxton Centennial Community Club. He is very much a part of the preparations. His family settled in Buxton in 1851.
I guess it was just coming home, because most everybody that left Buxton with plans on coming back on Labor Day, even, or homecoming we call it, until this day. It's just coming home and meeting people, and some of them I only see like from one homecoming to the next homecoming. And it's wonderful to see them.
We had to get ball team from
They had that
Detroit.
Mr. Robbins Field, didn't they?
Cleta Morris, Ruth Ann Shadd, Grace Fowler, Ivy Brown, and Dora Jones are a few members of the Sunshine Club. The club planned the homecoming since 1924 and still organizes part of the program.
And we also had a booth outside the church, and we sold chicken sandwiches and things like that. And other members always helped. Lola and all other members helped, you know, we had different positions we had to work on. But I got a real enjoyment out of it, and I still do.
Well, for me, I'm very family-oriented. And I always feel very happy, and it just delights me to see some of my family members who haven't returned within the year, and not unless there's a death, but that's always sadness. But then we get together, and on Sunday we have a eat out and a sing out, and it's always great to see our cousin Frank, 96-year-old gentleman who just rejoices to come back on Labor Day. But it's a family-oriented for me, and they are so important, that element.
Well, I think it's certainly a matter of whether and how important family, but I also think it's a matter of heritage. I think one really important thing about Labor Day is the fact that it's a one time when black people in southwestern Ontario and from other parts come back and get together, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's survived now. A lot of people, that's the only time of year that you can really go any place, well, other than Amherstburg or Caribana, which is more West Indian, but it's the only time you can go and see black Canadians, and I think that's really important to some people now. As we become more and more assimilated, I think we're getting away from that, but I think it's going to be a matter of heritage as well as family.
Sweet love. Oh, look who's sweet. Kiss her. That brings back memories to me. I know it. Down by the old cherry orchard, under that old cherry tree.
Stanley Prince is Brian Prince's grandfather. At 93, he can still hold his own on the dance floor.
No, leave it on. It's okay.
Dropping all your money, somebody.
I'm going to put some on. I'm going to put green on my cheek.
Why?
Because I'm going to be a tree. And trees have green faces. Yeah, I'm going to be a tree with Michelle. Yeah. One of
Michelle's being a tree?
Yeah, Michelle's going to be
Can
a
you
tree.
wipe it off?
We'll wipe it off after. It'll come off.
Did you get the white stuff?
Oh, they don't need the white, just the red. Yeah.
But don't scratch. Go to the back and have it right.
If you just pull right up there in front of the priest, I'll tell you when to come in, okay?
Hi, Mel!
I think people keep coming back because it's a chance to see their friends and relatives and old neighbors they had. It's sort of a time to recapture some of the feelings you had when you were younger growing up here. It seems as time goes on, people are more interested in the history of the area, and it's really important to come back and see those old landmarks and just remember who you are and where you came from.
This is your first trip to North Buxton. I've been taking pictures here. Has she been here before? Huh? She's a kid? Little thing that must have been. That's right, that's right.
Muriel Newby was born in Buxton 77 years ago. She's lived in California for decades, but Labor Day always finds her here, visiting with friends and family, rekindling memories.
I know she's going to give me a hug.
Oh, hi.
How you doing?
Good to see you. Well, of course I did.
Sure you did.
Sure, I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Good, good.
This box belonged to my great-grandfather, Solomon Newby, and he brought this box here, and he had some treasures in it. I haven't any idea what they were. He moved to a spot on the center road near the 10th concession. He buried it in the ground, and there was a rose garden. He had lots of flowers buried over this for safekeeping. And years later, when he was sure that he could stay in Canada, he dug this up, and he had it in his home.
Solomon Newby's freedom papers were in this box. He brought them with him when he came to Canada from Indiana. Muriel Newby thought the best place for her great-grandfather's box was in the Raleigh Township Centennial Museum, among artifacts and tools once used by the old residents of the area.
My father sold an acreage to the community club, and he always wanted that to be a nice park. In fact, he told me about a year before he passed that that would be a beautiful park someday, and he wanted it so that all the people could enjoy, and they are enjoying it. And each year the crowds seem to be larger. So that's why homecoming means so much to me, to know that this was our property.
When people think about Buxton, they think of it as a farming village, and actually there's very few people who do farm. Most of the people in the village work in Chatham or Tilbury or some of the other places around, but still that image of the farming village seems to persist.
You go out on the town last night? No. Did you go out on the town last night? No. No? Stayed home?
This is just a little push here, Grant, push. No, it's got a little bit of a lip on it. Well, I enjoy farming because you're involved more with your family. Your kids can come out with you and ride along on the tractor or deliver your grain. On a family farm, everybody can be involved with the work. The odd time Shan will come out and help drive the tractor or unload wagons. And she did some of the planting last year. And then going back on the other direction, involved with my parents and grandparents, and it's just a nice way to live. On our farm, my father and grandfather and I, we each have our own land that we own or rent. But we do share all the same equipment. One will buy one piece and the other guy the next. And now that prices aren't so good and I don't have the money that I once had or should have, Dad's been buying more of the equipment lately. As far as the work goes, we just all chip in. We all sort of have our jobs to do, and we all stay busy.
She's a little sticky.
Yeah. So watch that. Be careful on those sharp turns. That stay will break it.
This small corner of Canada is rich in traditions of freedom, rich in history, rich in memories. And for those who live on this land, and for those who carry these memories in their minds, Buxton is home.
I see glory in the air over my head. I see glory.